Hey guys, what is going on? I decided to move our little backyard chats to my second backyard, which is the beach over here. It's a beautiful day, perfect 90 degrees. I guess that's not very perfect, as you can see from the sweat maybe collecting on my brow. But for the past few months, I have been speaking to you guys about division and the importance of history and questioning everything. And I think it's very important to keep on speaking about these things because the further we get into this, the more divided we become, and on every single issue that we're presented with. And it's heartbreaking to see because we're not looking for common ground anymore. We want to sit there and say, you're wrong, I'm right. Some of the best advice that I ever got was when I was in my early 20s. And I was speaking to one of the men that I work with, and he was speaking about his wife. And he said, Brianna, the thing you have to realize in every relationship is that one person is always right and the other person is never wrong. And I think that we need to really accentuate that approach in today's world, because we need to recognize that we live in our truths, we hold our truths, and for some of us, these truths are concrete. They're not fluid like the water behind me. They are not, they don't ebb and flow. They don't come and go like the tides. Like they stay like these rocks that I'm surrounded by, and we don't sway from them, and that's dangerous. But what is also dangerous is where these truths are coming from. Are they coming from within? Are they coming from who we are, what we believe in, or are they coming from outside influences? So what I'm getting at is that the other day, I go to two separate businesses, and they both have televisions on, and they're two different channels, two different news networks. And as I'm watching these news channels, they're presenting the same issue. They're talking about the same exact thing, but both of them are spinning it in completely opposite directions. And as I watched this, I just shook my head in disbelief. Not that I don't believe it, but like just disbelief that this actually continues to happen without more outrage, more outcry from the public, expecting more from people that have incredible influence over our lives, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our well-being. And as I watched this, I remembered how the other day I had watched Vice, that incredible movie about the life and times of Dick Cheney and all of the fun things the man got up to as he held power in Washington. And there was a scene in the movie, that was sarcasm, by the way, just in case you didn't feel that. So there was a point in the movie where Roger Ailes comes to the White House and he proposes, creating a news network that is conservative. And, he gets poo-pooed and dismissed and everything else like that. And, you see Dick Cheney look back and he's like, maybe that's not a bad idea. But in the same instance, or somewhere before or somewhere after, Dick Cheney gets to thinking about how it is that we get to remove the Fairness Act from law. And so me, being the historian that I am, looked into the Fairness Act. And this is what I learned. So the Fairness Act was passed in 1949, and it was in regards to the news and radio and film. And basically, in this Fairness Act, it was to prevent controversial issues and do so honestly, equitably, and balanced. All well and good. Sounds just, sounds fair, sounds right. And it was important because right in the years before that, people saw what propaganda did. People saw what happens to a whole population of people when they're presented with something completely false or untrue. It leads us to war, it leads us to violence, it leads us to committing acts of atrocity that we would never imagine if we knew both sides of the story, if we understood one another rather than, if we made attempts to understand one another rather than make assumptions instead. So this was very important. So in 1949, this act was passed. The year before was passed the Smith-Mundt Act. Now Smith and Mundt were members of Congress. Listen, this is just basic history. If you guys want to look into things, you guys can keep on looking into it. But the Smith-Mundt Act stated that it prohibited the government from further propagandizing its own public and controlling the narrative. Now, why would that be important? Because they knew, psychologically they knew, socially they knew, financially they knew what could be done to sway public opinion, both for and against certain issues that were more to the benefit of the powers that be. More to the benefit of the people and less to the benefit of the powers that be. So in the article that I read, basically, it was from the Harvard Business Review, and it was stressing the importance of that. Now, these acts were not without controversy. People definitely debated whether or not this was against First Amendment rights, and this debate continued for the years to come. And 40 years later, in 1987, under Reagan, the Fairness Act was removed. And what does that mean? That now people didn't have to be fair when they presented the news. They can instead of being a objective story, they now could present it subjectively. And basically this article goes on to state that the role of the press was to promote public illusions and private privilege. Now we see this in the early 80s with more people coming out and saying that they got cancer from smoking cigarettes, and that, just certain things. So businesses, corporations, and the government wanted to still benefit while also potentially lying to the public about what they were no longer going to be able to benefit from. So this was removed in 1987, and let's not forget that also the year before that the Reagan administration were embroiled in the controversy of Iran-Contra. So why would you want anybody to know the full story when you can separate it and not tell the whole truth? Also another quote from the article is that news is whatever the government says it is. So something tremendous can happen, like anything. Just think of anything in the most recent news, Jeffrey Epstein not killing himself, something like that. But the government doesn't necessarily consider that news. They dismiss it as a controversy. That's a whole nother story. All right, so basically what this comes down to now, I'm gonna wrap this up really soon. So as time progressed and news channels became more divided, more divisive, and everything, I don't remember up until Bush became president that this country was so divided on so many issues. I think that a lot of people more looked for middle ground because people were still talking to one another. People weren't just they were getting their news when they opened up the newspaper, or they turned the news on at 6 o'clock at night. They weren't getting the news 24 hours a day. They weren't getting the news from an app. They weren't getting the news from someone they follow on social media. They were getting the news fair and balanced a little bit. And then, so that went on until 1987. And then in 2011, under the Obama administration, the Fairness Act was eliminated. What does this mean for today's world? It means that what we are watching is not always the truth. What we see, what we hear on both sides for every issue is convoluted. It's falsified. It's meant as a diversion or a confusion and everything else like that. Especially now today with our shortened attention spans. We spend less time thinking critically and questioning what is happening, and more time debating or arguing over things that we've been told rather than things that we actually know to be true. And so my personal opinion is that mainstream media relies on the belief that the viewers will take their word as face value and never look deeper into an issue. So we witness this on a daily basis when we try to have conversations with people. People be like, oh, that's not true, and it's the end of a conversation. That's the beginning of a conversation. Talk to people. Talk to them about their fears, their what they think about, what they feel. Like, we also live in a world where, especially in America, people are like, ooh, I can't talk about religion or politics. Yes, the fuck you can. Why? Because that's how we get to find a common ground. The less we talk about it, the less we question it, the more an agenda gets pushed, a narrative gets pushed that is not necessarily true. So just be aware of that. Basically what I'm trying to teach you guys is that, or tell you guys, is that be aware that there are factors at play that are meant to distract us, that are meant to disconnect us from one another, that are meant to divide us. And we have to take into consideration what's more important. Believing people that get paid to embellish, to sway public opinion, or the people that we're close with, the people we interact with, the people in our communities. I mean, just really think about that, because the more you turn yourself on to the people around you, and the more you turn yourself off to the people that want to control you, is the more powerful we will become as citizens of this country that are still protected under the Constitution. We're going to talk more about this stuff, and you guys can sit there and be like, oh God, she's become a crazy conspiracy theorist. I love a good conspiracy, I'm not going to lie. Why? Because they're fun. You know, some of them are not true, some of them are true. Join me this week or next week. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'd have to do more research. But I'm going to talk to you guys about the wonderful non-conspiracy theory about the CIA's role in promoting artists like Jackson Pollock after the war. And you'll see how this is all connected, how all of this has played a role in where we are today. So one thing I want to leave you with is, just as I leave you with all the times that I do these videos, talk to people. Even if you disagree with them, even if you argue with them, talk to them. Find common ground. Find something to talk about. Find something that brings you together rather than tears you apart. Because this nation, as Abraham Lincoln stated so many years ago, united we stand, divided we fall. Stand united, guys. Whatever you are, wherever you are, whoever you are, unite in one way, in our own humanity. All right, I'm gonna go jump in the water now. You guys have a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous day, and I'll catch you next time around. Bye.